Allen Lund Company has new offices in Ogden, Utah, and Indianapolis, Indiana. Check allenlund.com to reach them.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
An NTSB investigation into a 2022 crash involving a tractor-trailer and a party bus puts most of the blame on the trucking company. But Jamie Jones of Landline magazine says there's more to the story. We'll have a report. Detention time continues to be one of the issues in the industry with some of the most direct impacts on truck drivers' daily lives. And now, a new study is taking a closer look. I'll talk with Bryce Mongeon of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. A member of Congress has made clear his opposition to a bill that would increase insurance requirements for motor carriers. I'll speak with Congressman Mike Collins of Georgia about the bill and the issues behind it. And finally, Marty Ellis is fighting the usual spate of road rumors, including one that sounds just too crazy to be believed. I'll talk with the man who drives the spirit of the American trucker. But first, the news with Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. We'll get to a couple headlines here in just a moment or two, but wanted to bring in Jamie Jones of Landline magazine for a bit to cover a story that has a lot of ins and outs. Jamie, thanks for being here.
Hey, you're welcome, Scott.
So we're going to talk about a December 2022 crash on Interstate 64 in Virginia. The nuts and bolts here, a tractor-trailer and party bus were involved. 3 people on that party bus were killed when the truck collided with the back of that bus. The NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, investigated. They came out with a report that placed quite a bit of blame, actually some blame on the party bus company, but quite a bit more blame on the trucking company involved in this. I want to break this down in 2 ways. In a moment, I'm going to ask you what the report kind of doesn't get into. Okay. But let's start with more of the nuts and bolts of this case and exactly what the NTSB found happened there.
Well, basically, it was an early morning crash, so it was like 1:30 in the morning, and the individual driving for Triton Logistics was tooling along in his speed-limited truck. I think that should be noted, that it was speed-limited 69 miles per hour. Anyway, the NTSB investigators estimated that he was going between 60 and 70 miles per hour, and the bus, which he came upon, was traveling about 20 to 25. So the truck, there was no evidence of braking. There was, no evasive maneuvers.
It was on cruise control, I believe.
Was on, yes, on cruise control, and it clipped the back of the party bus. The party bus actually disintegrated, if you will. I mean, the top came off, the sides, the passenger compartment was exposed, and there was just a whole lot of chaos with vehicles spinning, and unfortunately 3 people did die in this crash. 9 more, I believe, were seriously injured, including the truck driver, and there were 11 that escaped with minor injuries, albeit probably a lot of trauma on the other side of that.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. So that's what we know about what happened there. The NTSB, again, put out an extensive report about what happened there, and they did have some recommendations that we're going to get into in just a moment. But I know you recently wrote this up for Landline.media and went through the report, went through what it did cover. Let's talk about what maybe wasn't covered as much in that report as to what happened, kind of looking at the party bus company here.
Yeah, it was when you read these reports, and it's pretty typical of what you see with an NTSB report that is on a crash involving a tractor-trailer. There is so much attention put on the tractor-trailer. And, be it size, be it whatever, they do fixate on the on the trucks. The thing I think that really got me and probably motivated me to dig in even more than I did initially on this one is this acknowledgement that the party bus was going 20 to 25 miles per hour on an interstate.
Yep, exactly. Where the speed limit was 70 miles an hour.
Pitch black.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not in a metro area that was lighted. So we have a black party bus with some reflective stuff on it going 20 to 25 miles per hour on an interstate, and the truck hits it. They have dash cam footage from the truck, and it was less than 3 seconds worth of images that you saw how fast the truck came up on the party bus. Yeah. And, so that party bus contributed, that you can't go that slow on an interstate. I still laugh when I see interstates that 40's the minimum. And, and the maximum 70 or 80 miles an hour.
That's a big speed differential.
That doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
So the 20 to 25, that to me is...
That's a school zone.
Yeah, it's a school zone, but it's extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
That is a dangerous speed to be doing. They'd have been better off parked on the road in the pitch black than cruising along in the traffic. And the only thing the NTSB really did with that, they blamed a pre-fuel filter screen that was 50% blocked. That's what they kind of blamed it on. But all that they did is said that speed may have contributed to the severity of the crash.
That may is doing a lot of heavy lifting there.
It's doing a lot of heavy lifting because had we had a 70-mile-per-hour driving party bus and a 70-mile-per-hour, tractor trailer, we would not have had this interaction that resulted in 3 deaths.
Yeah.
So, it's almost like, they had a blocked fuel filter, so, they get a free pass from that.
Yeah.
Well, they really don't. And the other part of it, the individual driving the party bus was a 23-year-old Class D license holder. He did not even have a commercial driver's license or a passenger endorsement.
Right.
So who knows if when that, party bus started slowing down and acting funny that he knew to get out, put out flares, put out cones, whatever to protect. He hadn't been trained on any of that.
Yeah.
Again, that could have stopped the whole thing instead of just making it more serious.
Right. And this incident itself, they did mention driver fatigue. They did mention the carrier manipulating electronic logging devices as well.
Yeah, there was some bad stuff on the truck side.
Yeah, absolutely. And, obviously a tragic situation and a lot of ins and outs, as I said off the top there. As a result of this, though, this incident aside, as a result of it, NTSB is reiterating some recommendations it had before, proposing some new ones, driver-facing cameras.
All the technology again, collision avoidance, driver-facing cameras, anything that takes the control out of the driver. That's what they're looking for.
Yeah. There's the driver-facing cameras, performance standards for forward collision avoidance systems, which would have probably played a role in this, again, with the truck going on cruise control. But as a result, again, from this, we see a number of recommendations come out from NTSB that would essentially put more regulations in place for truck drivers.
And let's just quickly note, these are recommendations. No agency is under any obligation to follow them. So we'll see what happens, but they did go for the technology.
Yeah, and again, landline.media. Jamie, you wrote this up. People can check it out there, and we appreciate your time.
Oh, you're welcome.
And in other trucking news here, the amount of freight hauled by trucks across U.S. borders was up in July. The Bureau of Transportation Statistics says trucks moved nearly $87 billion worth of freight in and out of the U.S. in July. That's up 8.4% compared to a year earlier. It also reverses a year-over-year overall decrease that was recorded in June. And a quick check-in on Capitol Hill and a few trucking-related bills in the House that are gaining support. The Prove It Act, the one that would require federal agencies to take small businesses into account when crafting new regulations, has added a 16th co-sponsor. Another bill, the Transportation Security Screening Modernization Act, which would streamline and simplify the security clearance process for people like truck drivers, has added a 62nd co-sponsor. And another bill here, the Household Goods Shipping Consumer Protection Act, which would give FMCSA the power to issue civil penalties against fraudsters, has added a 10th co-sponsor. All three bills are bipartisan. To get your lawmaker on board, head on over to fightingfortruckers.com. All the latest trucking news 24 hours a day over on landline.media. For Landline Now, I'm Scott Thompson. Mark, back to you.
Thanks, Scott. Next, OOIDA's Bryce Mongeon offers some more detail regarding an ATRI study of detention time. We'll hear from a congressman opposed to raising insurance requirements for trucking operations, and Marty Ellis discusses a hard-to-believe road rumor regarding the personal conveyance rule. We'll be right back. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Capital Reman is your leading source for quality remanufactured engines and components. Capital Reman stands ready to serve all OOIDA members to help reduce costly engine repairs or replacement. Visit capitalreman.com today and use code OOIDA10 to save.
Penske is the trusted source for quality used trucks. Whether you search our website, call our sales staff, or bid at our online auction, you are sure to find the right used truck for your business. Visit PenskeUsedTrucks.com to view our inventory and learn more.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Detention time continues to be one of the issues in the industry with some of the most direct impacts on truck drivers' daily lives. And now, a new study is taking a closer look at the topic. Welcome back to Landline Now. This is Regulatory Roundup, and I'm Mark Redding. I'm joined today by Bryce Mongeon of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. Bryce, how are you doing?
Mark, I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Very well. Thank you, sir. So this involves the American Transportation Research Institute, or ATRI, and I always like to start with this for folks who maybe are not familiar with what that is. What is ATRI, basically?
So ATRI is basically it's kind of a collection of different groups, organizations, kind of in part sort of led by ATA, but also OOIDA and the OOIDA Foundation contribute to the work they do. And it's more research and data-based work that they do. So it's not on the advocacy side of things, but it's on the research side of things for the trucking industry.
Now, I said at the start of this that this was a new study, but it's actually the latest report in a series of such reports. And when we get into these, I want to start with some definition because different people look at the term detention time in different ways. How do they define detention time?
Yes, so how they define detention time and what they're looking at in this report is the time that a driver spends at a customer facility between their scheduled arrival and their actual departure time. So basically from the time when you're supposed to be there until the time that you actually leave.
Okay. Now, there was some good news in the report up front, especially regarding the longest wait times. Can you walk us through what they found in terms of that?
Yes, and so they did find that the number of times that drivers are held for 2 to 4 hour wait times went down from 14% in 2014 to 5% in 2023. And that wait times or detention times for more than 4 hours decreased from 8% to 5%. So it is good to see that detention is down at those very high levels.
Okay. But how about under 2 hours?
Yes, and that's more or less where the good news seems to stop with this. They did see that periods of short detention, those lasting for under 2 hours, increased from about 24% to 29%, so about a 5% increase there.
Okay, so not really long wait times as much as there had been, but the shorter wait times are still very much a difficulty there.
Yes.
There appeared to be some real differences depending on the type of freight, which I found unusual. What did the study find on that front?
Yes, and so this, maybe isn't too surprising for listeners or for people who have experience in different segments of the industry, but they found that detention time is worse with refrigerated freight, and that more than half of stops with refrigerated freight included detention, and that was highest among all different sectors. They found that for other sectors of the industry, for dry van freight, it was about a third of stops had detention. Flatbed operations had about a quarter of stops involving detention time, and specialized freight had about 1 in 5 stops with detention time.
Now, that strikes me as a real problem because, of course, refrigerated freight in most cases has, I would think, a kind of a higher urgency due to the perishable nature of the freight, and also because that trucker's still paying for fuel to run that reefer while they're sitting around waiting for the loading dock to get to it. It just really struck me that would be a particular problem they've spotted there.
Yeah, it is interesting. And, part of how just me thinking about it, I'm sure other people's experience might find this true as well, is that it maybe also, though, is a convenient way to just have that extra storage space on site for, whenever you need to or whenever the facility is ready to unload it. And that kind of gets back to the bigger problem with detention here, and as we've talked about many other times, is that the value isn't placed on a driver's time. So it's cheaper or easier or more convenient to have that truck and that driver sit and wait, use their refrigerated trailer as storage instead of having to unload it and get it into the refrigerated area at your facility.
I want to get into some more detail here, maybe a little bit more into the weeds on some of the differences between different types of truckers and so on. And I'm wondering if you can just kind of go over some of their other findings, especially ones that struck you as particularly interesting in terms of differences between different types of operations or freight or so on.
The other interesting point that they found was that employee drivers experienced less detention time than owner-operators. And that jumps out because, again, maybe that's obviously for our members and for the kind of operations we represent for a large part is that's especially detrimental to them. But it may be the case that larger fleets or larger operations are able to negotiate with shippers and receivers or negotiate detention time pay. So there's more of an incentive in some of those cases for facilities to keep those drivers moving. So that was one of the differences that jumped out to me there.
Yeah, and an unfortunate one, and it kind of goes along with what we've heard over the years, too, as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. What about the cost? Because I know that the cost is a big deal to a lot of folks with detention time for a number of reasons. And I think the study, as I recall, looked at both the cost to individuals, but also the cost to the industry overall. What were some of those figures?
Yes, and so there are some really big numbers that they came up with, and they found that in the last year alone, 135 million productive hours were lost as a result of detention time, and that breaks down to 15 days worth of hours of service drive time per driver. And translating that to the distance driven, it's about 7,000 miles that are lost due to waiting, due to detention time. And they also point out that given that drivers are paid by the mile, detention resulted in somewhere between, they estimate, $11,000 to $19,000 in lost revenue per driver. And taking that back to the industry level, they say about $11.5 billion. It should also be pointed out that includes only employee drivers and not owner-operators. So that's just one segment of the industry. So, as we've talked about before in a lot of different contexts, obviously drivers' time has a lot of value, but given what they're calling here, lost productivity or lost earnings, it's just with detention time kind of going out the window.
Well, are truckers getting compensated for any of that time? I mean, I know the study did look at that as well.
Yeah, and so one of the things that the study does point out is that most companies offer to pay for detention time, but they estimate that it doesn't fully compensate for all of that lost time and all of those lost miles. And the other thing that they found was that the detention fees that go to drivers don't kick in until after that 2-hour mark, which has kind of become the industry standard. So employees are seeing some pay for detention time, but it's not fully making up for the value of all the time that they're losing.
Something else the study looked at that I think is worthy of talking about here are some of the effects that detention time is having on truckers and some of the side effects that it overall has. I'm wondering if you can tell us some of the highlights of that from this study. What are some of the effects that most stood out to you?
Yeah, one that really jumped out to me, and I was glad to see it was covered in this report, was what it means for drivers' access to bathrooms. In the study, they found that drivers indicated that 44% of customers' facilities do not allow them to use the restroom during detention time, which is really high. And I mean, when you're talking about just quality of life and making trucking an attractive profession, that is just a surefire way to cut against all the efforts to try and bring people into the industry and keep them in the industry. So that really jumped out at me, and I was glad to see that they included that issue as part of this report. And I think the other thing that they highlighted too is highway safety, because again, this is intuitive when you consider that drivers are paid by the mile, but if a driver is detained for longer, they're losing productive drive time. The study found that in order to make up that time, drivers who experience higher wait times drive at higher speeds after that to make up time and to make up money.
Okay, which seems like a pretty obvious outcome, but it's good to see that they have some statistical backup for that. What about solutions, Bryce? Obviously, the study looked at that, and certainly there are some common sense things I think most folks in the industry agree on. But in terms of the study, I'm wondering if you can tell us a few examples of what they thought were good solutions for these problems.
Yeah, they recommend some things like carriers negotiating fees for detention time. They talk about avoiding detention time by arriving early to a facility. But that's not always going to be practical, especially for smaller carriers. It's going to be especially difficult for small carriers or owner-operators to negotiate fees for detention time. And depending on the facility, you may not be able to get in there early. The report also mentions, basically not working with customers who consistently have high detention times. And again, that may or may not be feasible depending on an operation.
Okay. What about legislative solutions? Because we've talked about some of these issues and some of the effects of detention. Is there any legislation in process or on the horizon to deal with some of the effects of detention time?
Yeah, and one of the biggest item that we've been advocating for, that OOIDA has been advocating for, is eliminating the federal exemption that denies truckers guaranteed overtime pay, because it seems like all these other solutions, or kind of all these other problems, are all speaking to the same fact, which is that drivers' time is not fully valued. Even when you're talking about when employee drivers do get detention pay, it's only after that 2-hour waiting period. So even then, driver's time is getting discounted. And we really believe that if you were to eliminate the overtime exemption, and employee drivers that is, had to be compensated at the regular overtime rate of 1.5 of your pay after 40 hours, that would create the incentive for shippers, receivers, and carriers to keep their drivers moving. And again, it would also finally force everyone to count all of those hours that a driver works and put a value on all of their time. So I know I'm a little biased because that's something that we're working on here in D.C. day in and day out. But when I read about this report and I read about all the problems, it seems like the easiest solution to me anyway is to just put that value on a driver's time. We're not talking about any specific detention time pay. We're not talking about regulating rates, but just treating drivers like everyone else and putting a value on their time.
We just have a little bit of time left here, Bryce, maybe 30 seconds or so. Are there any other studies that are either out or on the horizon looking at this issue?
Yes, and so one of the ones that we'll be looking forward to is a report on the impact of detention time on safety of basically highway safety. And that's something that's required by the last highway bill, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So we will be looking for that. Again, we expect it'll probably be similar to these results and previous studies that show the longer you detain someone, the less time they have to drive their miles. So they're going to drive faster to make up that time so they can still take home what they need to take home.
Okay. Interesting stuff, Bryce. Thank you very much for all the information. We certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
That was Bryce Mongeon of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. You can keep up on regulatory news as it develops at the website landline.media. Again, that website, landline.media. And you can also find information about some of the most important issues in the trucking industry today and speak out on those issues at the website fightingfortruckers.com. And if there is a specific comment period on a regulation we mention here on the air, we'll put a direct link to where you can leave your comments at landlinenow.com. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Truckdown.com. Whenever you have a breakdown, you need Truckdown.com. 24/7 access to 40,000 verified heavy-duty repair vendors nationwide.
Repair secured. Load assured.
Truckdown.com.
Firestone tires are for more of everything, with more durability for more miles and more confidence in your fleet. Firestone's tested tires help fleets save with value where it matters most. Learn more at bridgestonenationalfleet.com/4moremiles.
Dispatch, I picked up that load of steel, so I'm ready to roll.
Sounds good. Remember, we're getting paid by weight, so make sure to use a CAT scale.
I wouldn't weigh anywhere else.
Forget miss accuracy, weigh your truck on a CAT scale.
Landline Now, welcome back. Back in December of last year, Congressman Chuy Garcia of Illinois introduced a bill titled H.R. 6884. The bill is simple. It would increase the minimum required insurance coverage for motor carriers from $750,000 to $5 million, with the possibility of increasing that amount in future years without additional congressional action. It's not the first bill to attempt such an increase, and Congressman Garcia is not the only member of Congress to propose a measure like that. However, other members of Congress and many people in the trucking industry have an entirely different view of the issue. And when it comes to bills like H.R. 6884, it's not a positive view. One of those members of the U.S. House who has spoken out on the measure is Congressman Mike Collins of Georgia, a man who has extensive experience in the trucking industry himself. I spoke with the congressman recently about the bill, the issues behind it, and what he thinks ought to be done. Well, first of all, before we get into the issue at hand, I know that you have a background in the trucking industry, and I'm wondering if you could briefly talk about a little bit about your history in the trucking business.
Well, actually, I am second generation in the trucking industry. My parents, back when I was a child, they hauled logs out of the woods to Georgia Pacific facilities. And so when I got old enough, I started working there, age 12, and started driving trucks. And probably about the age of 15, like most people that grow up in this type of industry, even though we couldn't get out on the road, but you learned how to drive. And then my dad was always involved with politics, so I actually started running our trucking company when I was 18, 19 years old. And when I got married at the age of 21, I told my wife there was no way that we were all going to make a living off of it. So we got into the trucking business on our own, and that's where we're at today. Eventually bought my parents out, and the third generation, my wife had given birth to twins the first time around. And they're 31. They've actually been running a lot of the day-to-day operations with my younger brother for the past, 5 or 6 years. So, the next generation has stepped in, and we run just north of 100 trucks all across the country every day.
Okay. Let's get to the issue at hand here. During a hearing earlier this year, you spoke out regarding a bill titled H.R. 6884, the Fair Compensation for Truck Crash Victims Act, introduced by Representative Garcia. And of course, this is the bill that would increase the insurance requirements for trucking operations from $750,000 to $5 million. And I'm wondering if you can start by just broadly spelling out what your concerns are regarding that bill.
Well, the concerns are that when you take a look at the average trucking company out there, 98% of your trucking companies, now, you heard me right, 98% are 10 trucks or less. They're not even valued at $5 million. So, and I know that they're talking about the insurance right now, the minimum is $750,000. And there's no way that 98% of the trucking companies can afford a $5 million policy. And in some cases, there's just not an amount that you can put on there. And the other thing that I always bring up is the fact that, the vehicles that are involved, if you're involved in an accident with a we call them four-wheeler, just a regular automobile, their insurance can start at like $10,000. You cannot replace any bumper on a truck for less than that. So we're at a disadvantage, and then you put on top of that, and AAA will back this up, 75% of the accidents out there are at fault from the four-wheeler, not the tractor-trailer. And so, what the real problem that we have in this country is not the amount of insurance, it's the lack of tort reform that we have. And you have all of these lawsuits that are going on from people that are just what we call bottom fishing, and trial lawyers that are just out there, doing it. They'll file a lawsuit just to see if they can get some money out of it. And it is just bleeding the industry. And so if you were to implement that law and create a $5 million minimum liability insurance, you are going to destroy the trucking industry.
I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit, and you've kind of referred to this already, but obviously, as you said, this is really going to affect those smaller companies the most. I mean, what do you think would happen to a lot of these smaller motor carriers if something like this were to pass into law?
Yeah, well, when you look at the average return on the trucking industry is around 2.5%, it's going to put them out of business. And in short order, that's what it's going to do. You're going to see your smaller companies fold up. They won't be able to afford this insurance. There's no way.
Now, if you had a situation like that, where you had so many small trucking companies go out of business, as someone who's been in the business, what do you think the overall impact on the industry as a whole would be if you've suddenly lost the smaller business end of the trucking industry?
Yeah, well, what's going to happen is, and it's the same with anything where the government gets involved, somebody's going to pay for whatever happens, and that's going to be passed on to the consumer. You're going to see trucking rates go through the roof, and then you're going to see the consumer prices continue to just skyrocket. Mark, there's no way around that. No one's going to go into business just to lose money and go out of business eventually just by giving your money away. You're in the trucking industry to make money. And the thing is, 99.9% of the people in the trucking business want to be safe. They're not out there to harm people. And they're doing the right thing. And that's where, so you want to look at what the actual problem is. And the actual problem is these trial lawyers that are out there bottom fishing and these runaway verdicts and these nuclear verdicts. And that's where I've always come right back to the point of what we actually need is true tort reform out there. And that just means that when these people don't win their lawsuits, that they actually have to pay. Because an insurance company right now, they will take a look at it and say, well, it's just cheaper for us to pay X amount and be done with it. And so X amount right now on a $750,000 policy is going to be a whole lot different from X amount on a $5 million policy. And then at the end of the day, that insurance company is going to pass that on right back to the trucking company in the form of a rate increase, because every year they're going to take a look at that trucking company's loss runs, no matter what, no matter if it wasn't your fault, even if they just paid off to get rid of somebody, they're going to tack that on your loss runs, and it's going to affect the trucking company's rates going forward.
You mentioned tort reform a couple of times there, Congressman, and obviously that's an issue that a lot of truckers are interested in for this reason and many others. What specific kind of tort reform do you think is needed to address situations like this?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, loser pay. When these frivolous lawsuits are brought, then they need to be held accountable for it, because you can file a lawsuit pretty cheap. That's just filling out forms, and they all got them now. But so it's not much money out to them. But when you sue somebody, they may have to wind up paying, even if it's frivolous. If a jury decides that let's just insurance money and give them the money, and that's where I say it's not right, and that's where tort reform comes in. And the other thing that we need to see is if we can move a lot of these cases into the federal court system, it would be a huge help on the trucking industry just from that standpoint, and get it out of. Right now, when you get sued, you either get sued at where the incident or accident happened, or either the trucking company's place of operation. And believe me, these trial lawyers, they're out there, they're looking at everywhere that they can to try to move these cases into jury-friendly or sue-friendly type of jurisdictions. And if they can do that, then they've got a better chance of getting some sort of verdict in favor of the plaintiff, no matter who was at fault. They don't care about that.
You mentioned there the loser pays concept of tort reform. Something that we've been kind of monitoring in a number of states is state legislatures that are looking at putting a cap on pain and suffering damages. And some states have already done this. To what extent do you think a federal requirement in that area is needed?
Well, and Mark, that literally states that nuclear verdict of what I was getting at. Sometimes I think people already know the terms, but that nuclear verdict is where you have a jury that just comes in. I think in one recent case in the trucking industry, somebody was awarded $250 million. And so that's where these states are coming back and say, hey, we need to cap what's going on with these nuclear verdicts to try to get a handle on it without doing the actual tort reform. But if you did tort, it would not only help just the trucking industry, but you're talking about all industries. You're talking about even in healthcare. You're talking about doctors. You name the industry, and they can tell you that there is a certain amount of runaway verdicts out there that tort reform would be a huge help to them. And when you do that, and you can actually drive the cost back down from everything from healthcare to the services that whatever they provide. So it's not something that's just just for the trucking industry.
I want to ask a devil's advocate question here. We've talked about the current minimum insurance requirement of $750,000. In talking with various insurance carriers, we seem to be finding that most trucking operations, as a practical matter, carry about $1 million. Do you see any need for any change in the current minimum insurance requirements?
No, I don't. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head there, man. The free market works. Marketplace works, and if people see a need to bump up their insurance, and they're large enough, and their company can afford it, then they're going to look at it. But every time that we get the federal government involved to dictate and try to operate somebody's business, I don't care what it is, it's usually a disaster.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about some of the other big issues in trucking right now while we have you on the line here, Congressman. And probably number one on the minds of a lot of truckers is the move by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration to require speed limiters in trucks. What is your view of that issue?
And I think I said this in a hearing not too long ago. We already have speed limiters, Mark. They're called speed limit signs. You see them going up and down every road. And then we have an enforcement called State Patrol and law enforcement, sheriff's office or local police, and they're monitoring that. You don't need speed limiters on trucks. What you need is just what you got, and that's enforcement of the law. And we have that out there. If I want to limit the speed of my trucks, then I do that, and we do that. Right now, we have the ability to the trucks are set up a whole lot different than what they were 20 and 30 years ago. So we have a lot of control over the torque versus the horsepower. And so you can set a truck up. We can set the limit on it on whatever we want. And we do that more for efficiency and fuel savings, to where the truck can get to where it's going at a safe speed, at a good, at a normal, to save time without being hindered, but yet also give us the efficiency that we need with the fuel economy. So we don't need the government interfering with that side of it. And besides that, we're not the only ones using the roadway. You've got cars out there too. So why are you just limiting to big trucks? I mean, if you're going to do it to everybody. And then where are you going to set it? What's slow enough? 55, 45? Where are you going to stop this? And what's the objective?
Okay. Well, Congressman, that's all I had. Thank you very much for your time. We certainly appreciate it.
Appreciate your time.
That was Congressman Mike Collins of Georgia talking about a bill, H.R. 6884, which would increase the minimum required insurance coverage for motor carriers from $750,000 to $5 million. I'm Mark Rettig, and this is Landline Now.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off Truckstop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2024 when you purchase Load Board Pro.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
If you're running ultra-low sulfur diesel in your vehicle, make sure you are prepared and protected all winter long with Howe's Diesel Treat, the #1 anti-gel product in North America from the 100-plus year trusted brand Howe's Products.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now. Welcome back. Every week we check in with Marty Ellis, who drives OOIDA's tour truck, the Spirit of the American Trucker. Marty has been celebrating Truck Driver Appreciation Week, something that should be happening every single day. But he sees the importance, and he hopes that truckers who don't see any of that appreciation don't get too jaded. Meanwhile, he's fighting the usual spate of road rumors, including one that sounds just too crazy to be believed.
Carolina west to Denver, up to Bangor, west to Austin, coast to coast, sea to sea, sail on, sail on.
Well, Marty, how are you?
I am lovely, Mark, and you?
I'm doing great. Where are we finding you this fine day?
Well, I am traveling over to the Road Angel Truckers Center. We're going to join them for their Jamboree. We'll be there the 20th and the 21st, and that's I-70 exit number 67 in Brownstown, Illinois.
All right. Well, that's a fine place. I've always heard lots of good things about it and talked with the folks there, and they always seem very nice and certainly up for helping truckers out.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great place, and I've never been to one of their jamborees, but they'll have some activities there. They got music, of course, food, so plenty of parking. So, if anybody's in the area, come. It's a great time to come check it out.
All right. Well, and of course, you're just coming off, as I recall, of Truck World, where you were celebrating Trucker Appreciation Week. And that's kind of a nice deal every year that I honestly think every week should be Truck Driver Appreciation Week, personal opinion. But it is kind of a good thing to have to set that aside, because we set so many times aside for other people.
It really is. I know we designate this 1 week, but you're right. People should be appreciating what the sacrifices that drivers do on a daily basis all year round. But they do a good job here. They have their lunch. They have prizes they're giving away. They give away T-shirts, and they double their points for the whole month if you're buying fuel here. And so it's a good old-fashioned truck stop here in Hubbard, and the people are always friendly, and they have a full restaurant, and a Blue Beacon truck wash nearby. So there's a lot of things you can get done while you're here, and then they have good showers. So it's a good place to be. And of course, they during their Trucker Appreciation Week, we've come out. This is our second time of coming out and helping celebrate it. And if you don't mind, I would like to talk a little bit more about trucker appreciation, other than just at Truck World. But in general, I've been kind of seeing a lot of things on social media about Truck Driver Appreciation Week, and some of us drivers get a little jaded about a lot of the trucking companies. The employees seem to use that as, for that week, they get free lunch, basically. And so many over-the-road truck drivers can't take advantage of it because, guess what, they're on the road working. And one thing I have to caution drivers about is to get too jaded. And we have to remember to appreciate at least the effort, even if you don't yourself get to gain during that week by getting a T-shirt or a free meal or something. At least the companies that are out there making the effort should be recognized for that. And maybe if you have some suggestions, to those companies, if you work for them, tell them, maybe next year we could, get a new headset for the phone. That'd be better than, a lunch and, little stuff that you might be giving out, something that they could really use. And so I think we need to be a little more creative on our own end and a little more appreciative on the effort that, whether it's a truck stop or whether it's a trucking company or even some of the scales, they give out things on during Trucker Appreciation Week. And no, I don't mean tickets. I mean, some of the time a sack lunch or things like that. And so I think we appreciate that week, but I would rather see that positivity all year round instead of just designated for this 1 week.
Absolutely. And for anybody listening who is not a truck driver, if you know one, thank them for everything they do today. Don't wait around. Don't wait for a special week. Just make sure that you say thank you for everything you do, because they certainly deserve it.
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about some of the other stuff going around. And I guess the rumor mill has been churning up. It's a little trouble again. What are you hearing out there in the way of rumors right now, Marty?
Yeah, it's so many things. That's why we always tell people, look, even if you hear some squirrely things, instead of either just believing it because you saw it on social media or you heard it from another truck driver, don't just take everything at face value. You need to kind of look into it a little bit. The most recent one that I was told by one of our members stopped in and said, you're not going to believe this rumor. And he was talking to another driver that worked for the same company. And the other driver told him that a person could use personal conveyance as much as they wanted, but only on Fridays. So
what?
For some reason, yeah. Well, we at least got a good laugh out of it. It's like I wasn't quite understanding why Fridays. Maybe they only worked Monday through Friday, and whatever you could do to get your work done, it was okay. But and of course, our member did set him straight and told him, you can always reach out to OOIDA for real answers to some of this, but you'd hate to get in a position with a law enforcement officer and then you're saying, but I was told that you could do this, but only on Fridays. And, hopefully the officer would have a sense of humor, if nothing else.
Well, you'd hope so, but that sense of humor is probably going to be he'll chuckle while he's writing you a ticket.
I mean, that is very true. But yeah, it is amazing what pops up out here for rumors, and some, there's some weird stuff, some weird rules and regulations. We all know that. Some of these states have come up with some creative rules that they want to put on people. But, when in doubt, give us a call.
Absolutely. And just in case everybody thinks that we're passing all this on as information, no, you cannot use personal conveyance anytime you want or as much as you want. And no, that doesn't apply on Fridays. It's when you're actually using it as your personal conveyance and not anything that involves hauling the freight to its end location.
Absolutely.
So
I'm glad you clarified that.
Well, you got to think there's someone out there who's listening to this and thinking, instruction manual. I have a reason to do this now.
Right.
Oh, well, you always bring us a good one, Marty. I'll tell you what, we've got a little bit of time left here. Why don't you tell us where you're headed to next?
We're going to be going to the TA in Walton, Kentucky, the 23rd and 24th of September. That's exit 175 off of I-71 and 75. And they have a KFC and the kitchen for food. They have 6 showers. It's a smaller stop. It's 60 parking spots, but it usually keeps pretty busy there.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, Marty, it's good talking to you again. And do you have any final words before you ride off into the sunset?
Hey, guys, first of all, don't believe everything you hear, and make sure to be kind to one another and give that guy next to you a break.
Brothers of the highway, children of the wind.
Once again, that was Marty Ellis, who drives OOIDA's tour truck, The Spirit of the American Trucker. You can find Marty's next stop on our show and every day at our website, landlinenow.com. That includes truck stops, truck shows, and other special events across the country. Again, you can find that at our website, landlinenow.com. That's our program for today. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife.
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
chrome, and I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us! Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.